Thank you all for coming here tonight supporting UNICEF. You may not recognize me, but I'm Audrey Hepburn. I'm known for Broadway productions, Hollywood movies, and most importantly, I'm the Goodwill Ambassador for UNICEF. I'd like to start off by thanking my son Sean for telling his story and as well as mine in his book, Audrey Hepburn, An Elegant Spirit. UNICEF is a United Nations organization that is completely dedicated to protect children's rights and was established in 1949. I became Goodwill Ambassador in 1989, and I traveled around the world raising awareness about children's needs. And I can testify that UNICEF brings hope to children around the world, and I was among many during World War II to receive medical attention and food during the war. Now, let me tell you a quick story about myself and how I got to where I was, since I didn't have enough time to write a biography about myself. I was born in Brussels, Belgium, May 4th, 1929, and died 6 weeks later. I had whooping cough, and my face turned blue, and I stopped breathing at 6 weeks old. My mother, Ella, had complete faith in God, and she prayed for my life, and God gave me a second chance. In 1934, I was sent to boarding school at the age of 5, and a year later, I found out that my father, Joseph Rustin, had walked out, and no one knew where or why he left. It was the most traumatic event of my life. 4 years later, I moved back and learned Dutch and continued ballet. My brothers had hid, avoiding being recruited for the war to work, and that's when the Germans invaded Holland. My mother and I were alone and were taken in by my grandfather, Baron van Hemstra, the mayor of Arnhem. It was 1944, and I taught dance lessons to earn money, but as food became scarce, I stopped teaching because I was too hungry and weak. And then the Battle of Arnhem began, and we began taking in refugees from the war. Holland was liberated on my 16th birthday, and then my brothers returned. And after the war, I returned to London and continued ballet and got to study under Marie Rambert, the most distinguished ballet teacher in London. My dream was to be a prima ballerina, but she told me that I would work best as a second ballerina because I was too tall, and the war had malnutrition and my muscles were impaired. My dream was crushed, so I did what I could, and I turned to modeling when I was introduced to a photographer, and then I turned to some acting. In the first play I was in, I got one line in 1948, and it was High Button Shoes. And my discovery, I'd give it credit to Colette, the famous French writer. I was at the same hotel as her. She was looking for the star of her Broadway production, and she saw me, said she had found Gigi. And I told her that I wasn't really much of an actress and I can't really act very well, but she said that I would do quite great, so I took her advice and I moved to New York at the age of 22, and Broadway production of Gigi went on in 1951. And after that, I starred in Roman Holiday as a princess, my first big-time movie, and I won an Academy Award for Best Actress. A year later, I starred as the main character in Sabrina and met my first husband, Mel Frere. Now, he told me to return to Broadway with him on Odine in 1954, and I did, and I won a Tony Award for that. And then I married him in Switzerland in the same year, and we had a son, Sean. While I was pregnant, I wouldn't accept any films because I was going to wait till I had my baby, and so when he was born in 1960, I accepted my first film after I was pregnant, and it was Breakfast at Tiffany's, and it was aired in 1961. I won my 4th Academy Award for that after, and then we Mel and I divorced in 1967, and I married Andre Doughty, a psychiatrist, in 1969. A year later, I had my second son, Luca. We lived a normal life. We weren't really a showbiz family, and they went to boarding school, but they didn't go to school with like actors and actresses' children. We lived normal life besides paparazzi trying to follow us. I tried to hang on to both of my marriages as hard as I could, but I didn't speak up when I was needed to, and the void left by my father's absence can take responsibility for the failure of both my marriages. And both men, Mel and Andre, needed to cope with their feelings by themselves, but they're still a huge part of my life. I made choices in my life. My first choice was my career when it got off, and then when I made a family, I chose them, and when I had children, I chose them. I chose them over acting and filming. When they started school, I missed them terribly. They couldn't visit me when I was filming because they were in school, so I stopped filming for a while and just stayed at home while they continued their education. I tried to give them what I did not have growing up, the reassurance that they were loved and they mattered and that they were important. And when my children grew up, I chose the less fortunate children, and I chose to give back. As Goodwill Ambassador of UNICEF, I raised awareness about children's needs, and I fundraised, and I was there with UNICEF for 4 years on 8 missions. My first mission was to attract attention to the poorest country in the world. It was Ethiopia, where people were suffering from drought and hunger and a civil war that was going on. I visited an orphanage in McCall where 500 kids whose parents died of a drought in 1985. I was in a rebel country where mothers and their kids walked 10 days, even 3 weeks, just to find food. Then they settled into camps just to die. It's hard to imagine. The term third world country I don't like very much, because aren't we all just one world? And I want people to know that the largest part of humanity is suffering, that starvation does exist, even in the most wealthiest countries like America. Nobody talks of it, but it's really the greatest shame of time, and it must stop. 25,000 children died last week, dying this week and next. It was 1988, it was August. I was in Turkey, and that's where the 6 main child-killing diseases were tuberculosis, tetanus, measles, polio, and whooping cough. UNICEF and the World Health Organization teamed up and made a universal goal for child immunization. Their efforts saved and are saving more than 3 million young lives per year. It's quite amazing. In other places, UNICEF gave the miracle of water for children and mothers and families who had to walk miles just to find fresh water, can walk outside their village to wells that UNICEF had dug up for them. My last trip was to Somalia. It was September of 1992. It's the hardest mission yet. There, 8 million people were starving to death. Nothing prepared me enough to go to camp and meet a little kid. The next day, they were gone. And then I was expected to go back to my hotel room and drink a bottle of water, and to get on my plane and fly home, go back to my regular life. It threw my whole life off balance. And when I got back, I told my son Sean that I had been to hell. It was 1992. I was 63 years old, and I was diagnosed with cancer. I had surgery, and the cancer had spread from my appendix. And the following month, in December, the disease developed exponentially, so I returned to my home in Switzerland and stayed there and rested with my family. When I was strong enough, I would walk outside in my garden, but mostly I would stay inside and rest. My family came and we had a Christmas. I couldn't go out and buy presents for them, so I gave them little knickknacks around the house. My son told me that it was the most important thing to him. Audrey Hepburn died in her sleep in 1993, in January, of colon cancer. She was supposed to win a Special Academy Award for her humanitarian work, but she didn't get to receive it because she died. And her sons Sean and Luca, and her longtime friend through UNICEF, Robert Walders, they established a Audrey Hepburn Memorial Fund in 1994, and that fund supports many organizations around the world dedicated to help improve the lives of children through various programs and initiatives. And just recently, the Audrey Hepburn Memorial Fund, Children Fund, and the U.S. Fund for UNICEF made a 10-year commitment to support UNICEF's All Children in School educational initiative to bring back quality basic education to over 115 million children in developing nations. Yeah, we don't have to watch the slideshow.